Hello everyone, in this video I will show you how to set up a full MERN stack project from scratch. You will learn how to create basic user routes, test them in Postman, and connect the frontend and backend. This setup gives you a solid foundation to start building your own full stack applications. So this is what we're gonna learn in this video. So let's get started. Okay, so let's create two folders, backend and frontend. Now let's open our terminal by pressing Ctrl and backtick. And now let's go to the backend folder by saying cd backend. Now inside backend folder, let's initialize a Node.js project by saying npm init-y. So as you can see, now inside backend folder we have this package.json file, and from here we can manage our project. Now let's install some packages. So let's install Express to be able to work with Express. It's a framework built on top of Node.js, which simplifies the way we work with Node.js. Then let's install .env. It's a package which will allow us to get access to the environment variables everywhere in our application. Then let's install Mongoose to be able to work with MongoDB. And also we can install bcrypt.js, because when we create a user, we will register a user, and then of course we want to hash his password. So for that we can install bcrypt.js. So I think that's it. So let's install these packages by pressing enter. Okay, as you can see, now we have node models, package.json and package-log.json inside backend folder. And as you can see, now we have this dependencies object. Okay, now inside backend folder, we can create a new file called server.js. You can call it index.js, app.js, but I prefer to write server.js. Okay, and here I want to use this modern syntax. I want to say import express from express, but right now by default I cannot do it. Only this syntax is available to me, which is const express will be equal to require express. But I don't want to use this syntax. So I don't want to use this syntax. Instead, I want to use this syntax. So for that, inside this package.json file, under these scripts, we can write type, and from here we want to choose this module. So let's save it, and now we can use this syntax. So let's create an instance of our application by saying const app will be equal to express. Okay, then when we open our app in the root, so for that I write / as you can see, it means in the root. So when we open our application in the root, we want to show some response. So for that we can use these request and response objects. So request is what comes to us from a client, so from frontend to backend, and response is what we respond to that request. So here let's say that in the response we want to show the message hello world. So when we open our application in the root, it will be a request, and our response to the request will be hello world. Okay, and then we can say that we want our application to listen on some port. So let's use a variable called port, which doesn't exist yet. And in the console, we can show this message. We can say console.log, and we can say server is ready. And we can say server is ready at port. And here we want to provide this variable. Oops, here I need to say port, but we don't have this variable yet. So in the root, let's create a file called .env. And here we want to store some sensitive information about our application. So here I will create a variable called port and I will assign it to be 5000. So let's save it. Okay, now to get access to this variable, to this environment variable, first of all, I need to import .env package from .env. So let's say import .env from .env. And then to be able to get access to that variable, I need to say .env.config. Okay, and only now I can get access to that variable. So as you can see, it loads .env file contents into process.env by default. So if we hover over, we can know much more and we can know what this does. So as you can see, it loads .env file contents into process.env by default. And now I can say the following. I can create this variable, which is port, and it will be equal to process.env.port. So why process.env? As you can see, this function loads .env file contents into process.env. And inside .env, we have this variable. And by doing this, by writing this, we can get access to this value, which is 5000. And in case of some problems, we can manually type that it will be 5000. So this variable will either have this value or this value. Okay, so that's it. Now we have a very minimal structure of our application, of our server. So now we can save our file and we can start our application. Okay, so for that, we need to say node, and then we need to provide the path to this server.js. So since I am inside this backend folder, from here I need to say node server.js. So let's press enter. And as you can see, server is ready at 5000. So let's open it. And when we open it, we should see this message. So let's do it. So for that, we just need to type localhost 5000. So let's open it. And as you can see, now we have this message. So now I will split my screen. Okay, as we can see, now we have this message. So for now, let's close this terminal. And now let's try to make some changes here. Let's write something like this. Let's add some more text. So let's save it. And as you can see, nothing has changed even if I refresh the page. So to see the changes that we made, first of all, we need to stop our server by pressing Ctrl and C. And now our server is stopped. If I refresh the page, you can see that this site can't be reached. Now let's start our server again. And as you can see, server is ready at port 5000. So as you can see, our server is ready at 5000. I should have written at port, but it isn't so important right now. So as you can see, now we see the changes that we made. But to be able to see the changes that we made, we constantly need to restart our server, which is very inconvenient. So to handle this, we can install a package called nodemon. So with nodemon, we don't need to restart our server every single time to see the changes that we make. Okay, so now let's stop our server again by pressing Ctrl and C. And now it is stopped. And now let's install nodemon. So let's say npm install nodemon, but I want to install it as a dev dependency. So that's why I write dash and D and capital D. So let's open our package.json, and under these dependencies, we will see dev dependencies. So let's press enter. And as you can see, now we have dev dependencies, and inside we have nodemon. Okay, that's great. now we need to make some changes in our package.json. So now we can remove this test and we can write dev, and then we want to provide the path to our server.js. So here let's say, so here we are already at the same level with server.js. Okay, so for that we need to say nodemon and server.js. So let's save it. And now if we write npm run dev, this script will work. So we will start our application using nodemon. And also here I want to say at port. Okay, so let's save it. And now let's start our application. So let's press enter. And now as you can see, we see that nodemon is working. So nodemon is watching. And now we have server is ready at port 5000. Now let's make some changes again. Let's remove this text and let's just say hello everyone. So let's save it. And as you can see, nodemon restarting due to changes, but we don't immediately see this text, but we will see it if we refresh it, as you can see. But without nodemon, even if we refresh the page, we wouldn't see it, because we would need to restart our server. But with nodemon, we just need to refresh our page to see the changes that we make. I think that now it's clear to you why we want to use nodemon. Okay, so let's close our terminal, and now I think that it's time to connect to MongoDB. So for that, inside this .env file, we can create a variable called mongo_URI. And now let's visit the website of MongoDB. So now I am on mongodb.com. Let's click sign in. If you don't have an account, of course, you need to create an account first. I think that it's clear. So let's log into our account. Okay. And here I will click new project to create new project. And now let's give it a name. I will say MERN stack setup. So let's click next. Let's click create project. Now let's click create a cluster. And here we want to choose this free version. Of course, if you want to choose one of these versions, it's up to you. But for the sake of this tutorial, I will choose this free version. And then I don't want to preload sample dataset, so I will uncheck it. Then you can change this name if you want, but I will leave it as it is. And everything else can be left as it is. So let's click create deployment. Okay, and here, as you can see, we have our username and password. So let's copy our password and then click create database user. Let's click choose a connection method, drivers. And from here, we can copy our connection string. And as you can see, it already includes username and our password. So let's copy it and let's paste it right here. And then here you can define what kind of name you want to give to your database. And here I just want to write, for example, webdevbay. Okay, so let's save this file and get back to mongodb.com and let's click done. And now if we go to clusters, and if we click browse collections, as you can see, we don't have any data yet. So let's get back to the code. So now let's try to connect to our database. For that, inside backend folder, we can create a new folder called config. And inside this config folder, we can create a file called db.js. And here we can import mongoose from mongoose. And let's create a function called, let's say, export const connect db. Of course, it will be asynchronous. And here we want to use try and catch block. And here we want to say const con. It's like connection, but it's a short form. It has to be await mongoose.connect function. And here we want to give access to this Mongo_URI to this connection string. So for that we can say process.env.mongo_URI. And then to see if we manage to connect, we can say console.log backticks, and here we can say MongoDB connected. And then here we can say con.connection.host. So we can show the host. And if we see this message in the console, it means that everything is correct. And in case of some problems, we can show the error in the console. And also we can say process.exit with status 1. So it means that our application will stop immediately and not continue anymore. So 1 means that it is unsuccessful and 0 means that it is successful. So if we hover over, you can read it yourself. Okay, so let's save it. And now inside server.js, we want to use this function. Okay, so here let's do the following. Here let's import our function. But here we shouldn't forget to write .js. Otherwise, we will have some problems. And then after this app.get method, we can use our function. So let's say connect db. Okay, so let's open our terminal and now let's save this file. And as you can see, we have a problem. So let's find out why. Here we have that URI parameter must be a string, but we got undefined. So we need to make sure that it is a string. So actually the problem is because we should have .env file inside backend folder. So that's why we have a problem. .env file must be in the backend because it is where the server code server.js runs and loads environment variables like mongo_URI. So when we call .env.config, it looks for .env in the same folder where the server runs. So that's why we should take this .env and put it inside backend. So let's move it here. Okay, and now let's try one more time. So let's stop our application by pressing Ctrl and C, and let's say npm run dev. And as you can see, now we have server is ready at port 5000 and MongoDB connected, and we see this host. It means that we successfully connected to MongoDB. Okay, now let's close our terminal, and inside backend folder, we can create one more folder called models. And here let's create a model for our user. So let's say user.js. So in this file, we basically want to define what kind of properties we want our user to have. Okay, you'll understand everything better as we keep going. And let's close these tabs that we don't need. Okay, so here let's import mongoose from mongoose because it will be in MongoDB. I mean, we create a model, and according to that model, we want to create our users, and we want to save our users in MongoDB. So of course we need to use mongoose so that inside MongoDB we will have our user with the correct properties as we define them here. And here let's create a variable called user schema will be equal to new mongoose.schema. And here let's say that we want our user to have email. And let's say that the type will be string. And of course, we want it to be required. So we can say required property to be true. And we want our emails to be unique. So let's say that it will be true as well. Then we want our user to have a password. So let's create one more property called password. And type will also be string, and it will also be required, but it doesn't have to be unique. So it isn't necessary for us to mention it here. Okay. And also we want to know when a certain user was created or updated. So for that we can use timestamps. So let's say timestamps to be true. So by using these timestamps, we will be able to know the time when a user was created or updated. Okay. So now let's say export default mongoose.model. And then here we say user. We can say user and this variable, which is user schema. So let's save it. And now we have successfully created a model for our user. So each of our users will have two properties, email and password, which we defined. And also they will have timestamps. Okay. Now let's create one more folder inside backend folder called routes. And let's say that it will be user routes. Here we want to create a route to be able to create a user. So it will be for registering a user. So here let's import express from express. And here let's also import our user model that we have just created. So let's say user. And here we shouldn't forget to write .js, because otherwise we will have some errors. And then we can import bcrypt from bcrypt.js to be able to hash our passwords. So let's see bcrypt.js. Okay. And now to be able to register routes, to be able to create routes, we need to say const router will be equal to express router. So by doing this, we will be able to create as many routes as we want. Okay, it's like a mini express app, and we do it to be able to define routes. Okay, so here let's say router.post method, and it will be a register. The endpoint will be register, and it has to be synchronous. Here we want to have request and response. Okay, and we want to destructure email and password from the request, from request.body. So as I have already said, request is what comes to us from a client. So our client will send email and password. So our frontend will send email and password to our backend. Okay, so here we handle our backend. So by doing this, we will be able to get access to them. So from our request, we can get access to this email and password, and then we can keep going. Okay, and here we can check if they are provided or not. So if at least email isn't provided or a password isn't provided, we can say return response. So our response to that request. So we can return a response with status code of 400. It means that it is a bad request. And then in the JSON, in the message, we can say message. And let's say, please provide all the fields. Okay, then we can use try and catch block. And here we need to find out if this user with this email already exists. So for that, we can say const user exists. So we need to create this variable. And then we want to say await user model dot find one method. And here we want to provide an email. So here, as you can see, we use this user model that we have just created. And then inside our MongoDB, we want to know if there is already a user with this email. So we try to find a user with this email. So if there is a user with this email, this variable becomes true. And if there is no user with this email inside our MongoDB, this variable will return false. Okay, so if user exists, then we want to return response with status code of 409, meaning that there is a conflict. It means that there is already a user with this email, so you cannot register. So we can send this status code, and in the message, let me copy this. Let's paste it here, and in the message, let's say that user already exists. So here I will just say user already exists. But if it's not the case, if user doesn't exist yet, we can create one, but before we want to hash his password. Okay, because in our database, we don't want to store plain text passwords. We want them to be hashed. Okay, so for that, we can create a variable called salt, will be equal to await bcrypt dot generate salt, and it will be 10. So it is number of rounds to use, and it defaults to 10 if omitted, but we provided it anyway. Okay, and it synchronously generates a salt. So it generates a random salt, a unique string of characters to be combined with the password before hashing. And then we can say const hashed password will be equal to await bcrypt dot hash, and here we want to say this password which comes to us from our client, and we want to hash it using this salt. Okay, so if we hover over, you can read it yourself. So by doing this, we make sure that in our database we will have hashed passwords. Okay, and now we hashed our password, we have our email and password, and now we want to save our user in our database. So for that, we can create a variable called user will be equal to await our model dot create method, and here we want to say email and password, and password will be equal to our hashed password. Okay, and then in the response we can say response with status code of 201, meaning that we managed to create a user. So in the JSON, let's say message, and here let's say user registered, and here we can also provide his data. So we can say user, and when it comes to data, we only want to show his email, so we can say user.email. Okay, and that's it. So after we create a user, we want to show his email in the response, and we send this 201, meaning that everything went successful. And in case of some problems, here we can say response with status code of 500, and 500 means that it is internal server error, and in the JSON, in the message, we can say server error. Okay, and now to be able to use this route, we need to say export default router. So let's save it. Okay, and now inside server.js we can use it. So here we can say app.use, and we want to provide like a path. It will be API users, and here we want to provide our routes. So let's say user routes, but we don't have it yet, so we need to import user routes. So under this connect db, let's say import user routes from routes and user routes.js. So what does it do? As you can see here, we have only one route to be able to register a user. And this is like a prefix. And when we use these user routes, we will be able to get access to this register, and it will be like this. But we don't write it like this manually. Instead, we just import these user routes. And since we have this register, we will be able to get access to this register when we work with this API and users. I think that is clear to you. If we had one more route, for example, for login, it would be right here, and then we would be able to get access to it like this. It would be like login. Why? Because inside this user routes, we have this login, but we do not type it like that. It's like a prefix, API users. It's like a convention. You can use whatever you want, but it's a convention which I stick to. So in a nutshell, all the routes that we have here, we will be able to get access to them using this prefix, and if it will be like register. Okay? I think that it's clear to you. And now here we need to say the following. Here we need to say app.use express.json. So why do we need to write it? So it tells Express to automatically parse incoming requests with JSON payloads and make the data available in request.body. And here we have request.body, as you remember. So without it, request.body would be undefined and our server won't see the data. So that's why we need to write express.json. So let's save it. Okay. And I think that now it's time to test our route in Postman. Okay, so let's open Postman. Okay, if you are new to Postman, here you need to click this plus button to create a new collection. Let's click blank collection and we can give it a name. So let's rename it and it will be MERN stack setup. So it's completely up to you. We can add a request. So let's say that it has to be a post request. So if we click this drop down, you can choose whatever you want. And as you can see, it is still get, but if we save it by pressing Ctrl and S, as you can see, now it is post. And now we need to provide our path, our full path, and it will be http://localhost:5000 API users and register. Why localhost 5000? It is because our application is running on this port, and then we have this prefix, and then we have this route. Now let's go to body, raw, and here we need to provide email and password. Okay, so let's write email, and here let's say john@gmail.com, and for the password, let's provide this password, and now let's click send, and let's see what we have. As you can see, everything went successful. We have our message, user registered, and we have our user with his email. And we have this status, which is a new resource was created successfully. Now let's see it in our database if we have this user or not. So let's open our MongoDB, and here let's click refresh. And as you can see, here we have our user. And as you can see, web-dev-bay is the name of our database, and users is the name of our collection. Why users? Why is it plural and not singular? It is because here we have user, but MongoDB does it this way. It makes it to be lowercase, it becomes user, and it makes it to be plural, so it becomes users. Here, if we had, for example, product, in MongoDB, it would be products, okay? and web.dev is the name of our database, and users is the name of our collection. So here we have our user. Okay, let's keep working in Postman. Now I want to click send again and see if we manage to create this user one more time. So let's click send. As you can see, we have an error, we have conflict. So the request conflicts with the current state of the server, so it couldn't be processed. We have this message, user already exists. Okay, now let's try to remove this password property, and we should remove this comma as well, because as you can see, otherwise we will have an error. Okay, so let's click send, and as you can see, we have an error. Please provide all the fields. Okay, now let's try to create one more user, and here I will say Jimmy, and the password will be the same. So let's click send, and as you can see, we managed to create this user. So let's see it in our database. Let's click refresh, and here we have our user, and as you can see, our passwords are hashed, and we can see when a user was created and when a user was updated. Okay, now in Postman, you can create as many collections as you want and as many requests as you want. Okay, I think that it's clear to you, and that's it. It's like a basic testing in Postman. Of course, here we do not consider the cases when we need to provide tokens to verify users, and I have covered it in my other videos, so you can go to my YouTube channel. So there you can find videos which may be interesting to you. Now let's try to save our request, this request, and we can even rename it, and let's say create a user. Okay, so let's save it, and now we can save this request by pressing Ctrl and S. Okay, now let's work with frontend. So now let's open our terminal, and let's create one more terminal, and here I will go to frontend folder, and from here I want to say npm create vite at latest and dot. So why I write dot? So that everything will be installed inside this frontend without creating any other folders. So let's press enter. And here let's choose React, then JavaScript. Okay, now let's install Axios. So let's say npm install Axios, so that our frontend will be able to make requests to backend. So let's install it. Okay, now it's time to connect Tailwind CSS to our project, so let's do it. So for that we need to visit the official website, and here let's click get started. Since we use Vite, we are in the right place, and we can skip this first step because we have already done it. And now we can copy this and paste it in our terminal. So let's paste it here and press enter. Okay, now we need to make some changes inside vite.config.js file, so let's copy this. And inside vite.config.js file, let's paste it here, and then let's copy Tailwind CSS, and inside this plugins array, we can use this Tailwind CSS here. Okay, and now let's import Tailwind CSS. So inside this source folder, inside this index.css, we can delete everything and paste this import Tailwind CSS. So let's start our frontend by saying npm run dev. And let's open it. Okay, I will split my screen again. Okay, so let's close our terminal, and now let's close the tabs that we don't need. And we can delete this app.css because we don't need it. And inside app.jsx, we can remove this boilerplate code. So let's do it. And here I want to have this div. Here let's say hello, and let's remove all of this. Okay, so let's save it, let's refresh it to reset the styles, and now we can change this default title. For that we need to open index.html, and here we can write MERN stack setup. So let's save it, and here we go. Okay, now we can create some states for email, password, and the message, and we want to be able to create a user from frontend and send this data to backend. Okay, so here let's create some states. I will say const email set email will be equal to use state, which we should import, and by default it will be an empty string, and the same for password. And one more state for the message to know if we managed to do everything correctly or not. Okay, and now let's apply some styles to this div. Let's say that it will be min height screen, so that it will take the whole visible screen, and we want to put all the content of this div right in this center. So for that we need to say flex item center and justify center. So let's save it. As you can see, hello is right here. So here we want to have a form, so let's create a form. We can remove this action, and here we can have input type will be text. Actually, type should have be email, and for the placeholder we can say email, and value will be email, and on change we can get access to this event object, and we can say set email to whatever we type. Okay, and here inside this form we can also create h2 tag, and here we can say register. So let's save it and see what we have. Okay, here we go, and let's apply some styles to this input. So here let's say class name, let's say that it will be border, and padding will be 2. So let's save it. Okay, and let's say that it will be rounded. Okay, now we can copy this input and paste it here, and here it will be password, and here we should also have password. So let's save it. Okay, let's make the background color to be gray 100. Okay, and we can add some padding, which will be 4 horizontally. Okay, then to this form we can add the following styles. We can say that background color will be white, and padding will be 6, and it will be rounded large, and we can add some shadow, which will be medium. Great. And let's say that max width will be small, which is 384 pixels. So let's save it. Okay, and here to these inputs we can say that width will be full. Okay, and to this input we can say that margin bottom will be 3. Okay, and we can say that width will be full for this input as well, and we can actually say that margin bottom will be 3 as well, because we're gonna have a button here. And let's add some styles to this h2 tag. Let's say that text will be 2XL, font will be bold, margin bottom will be 4, and text will be center. Great. And finally, under this input we can create a button. Let's say register. Let's add some styles to it. Let's say that width will be full, background color will be blue 600, text will be white, and padding will be 2, and it will be rounded, cursor will be pointer, and on hover we can make it to be a bit darker than its initial color. So let's say blue 700. So let's save it. Okay, so now we need to show a message. So if we manage to do everything successfully or unsuccessfully. So under this button, we can see that if message is true, only then we want to show this p tag, and here we want to show this message, and we can add some basic styling to it. We can say that margin top will be 3 and text will be, let's say it will be gray 400. Okay, and let's just save it and let's write something like hello. Okay, and we can make it even darker. So let's say that it will be 900. So it doesn't really matter. We can leave it as it is. Okay, so let's remove it. And now we need to create a function so that we will be able to create our user. So let's create a function called handle submit. And here it will be asynchronous and we can get access to this event object. And we want to prevent the default behavior so that when we submit our form, our page refreshes. So we want to prevent it by saying event.prevent default, and we want to reset our message if it was true. Okay, and here let's say try and catch block, and here let's say const response will be equal to await Axios dot post method, and here we need to provide our path, which is http://localhost:5000 API users and register. And also I forgot to say that for these inputs we want to say that they should be required, so we can do it like this. Okay, and now let's come back here. Okay, and here we need to provide our data, which is email and password. Okay, and then we need to say set message to response dot data dot message, and oops, we need to remove it, and we can show in the console the response. So let's say console dot log response dot data. Okay, and here in case of some problems we can say set message, and here we can say error dot response question mark dot data question mark dot message, or something, oops, or something went wrong. So you may wonder what kind of syntax it is. So here we write these question marks, and it is called optional chaining, and we use it because it lets us safely access deeply nested properties without crashing if something is undefined or null. Okay, so let's copy this function, and when we submit this form we can say on submit, and we can use this function. Okay, and let's open our console, and here I will provide some data. Here let's say mark@gmail.com and password. So let's click register, and we have that something went wrong. So let's find out why. I guess that it is because we didn't import Axios from Axios, because it should be right here. Okay, so let's say import Axios from Axios. So let's save it and try one more time. So let's say mark@gmail.com and password. And now we have one more problem. It is because access has been blocked by course policy. So for that, we can come to vite.config.js file and make some changes. So let's open vite.config.js file, and here instead of using this full path, we can remove it. Okay, we can take it and we can use only this prefix. So now we can come to this vite.config.js file and we can say server, then proxy, API, and target. And here let's paste what we have just copied and save it. So whenever we have API, this will be like a prefix. Okay, and now by doing this configuration in vite.config.js, we should get rid of that error. And as you can see, now it looks clean and modern. So let's try one more time. So let's say mark again at gmail.com and password. And as you can see, we have this message, user registered, and we see this data. So let's see it in our database. So as you can see here, we have Mark. Let's try to create one more user. And here I will say, actually, when everything is successful, we can reset these fields. Okay. So here, if everything is successful, we can say set email to be empty and set password to be empty. So let's save it and try one more time. Now let's refresh the page. And now let's say steven@gmail.com and provide password. So as you can see, we have that our user was created and these fields are reset. So as you can see, we have our user. Let's see it in our database. Let's click refresh. And here we have our Steven. That's great. Now let's try to create a user with the same credentials. I will say Steven again. Let's see what we're gonna have. As you can see, we have an error and it says user already exists. Okay, and now guys, I think that we can create one more route to fetch all the users. So let's try to do it. So for that, let's open our routes. And here we have user routes, okay? And here we need to say the following. So here under this register, we can create a new route. So let's say router.get method. And here we can say that the endpoint will be users. Then here we want to have request and response. And then here, let's say const users will be equal to await our user model dot find method. And of course, we don't want to return password, even if it is hashed. So we need to exclude it. Oops, it has to be asynchronous. Okay, so we don't want to show our password. So that's why we can say select and we can say minus password. So by doing this, we will not include password. And then in the status code, we can say response with status code 200. And actually, it has to be inside try and catch block. Okay. And here we want to say catch. So response with status code of 200. And in the JSON, we can show our users. And here we can see, in case of some problems, we can actually copy this and paste it here. So let's save it. And now let's test this route inside Postman. So here, let's create one more request and it will be get method. And let's rename it to be get users. Okay. And we need to provide our path. We can just copy this and we should use this get method. And here we just need to say users. Okay. So let's click this send button. And as you can see, now we have all our users and none of them has the password field. It's great. So that's it, guys. If you find this video helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done it yet. Thank you. I really appreciate it.